Do the Zionists control the Labour Party, and can the vote stop pro-Zionist politicians? Let's take a look. Election day is fast approaching, and all sides are trying to convince people that their vote will make a difference. Muslims are told that voting for independent pro-Palestinian candidates can make a difference, and they can make things difficult for pro-Zionist MPs in the parliament. So do the Zionists control the Labour Party, and do they control the other parties? Do they control the UK Parliament? To make sense of this, we need to be aware of history and what has taken place. European civilization has a long history of persecuting the Jewish people, killing them, expelling them, persecuting them. Anti-Semitism was made in Europe. It is a European problem. Ever since Christianity became dominant in Europe, Christians have always persecuted the Jews, blaming them for killing Isa alayhi salam, killing Jesus, and persecuting throughout the ages. So for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, all across Europe, Jews were persecuted, hated upon, killed, expelled. And there is probably not a land in Europe which did not do this. So the massacre of Jews, the expulsion of Jews, is a reoccurring theme in European history. The hatred of Jews is part of European history. So to think that now suddenly, after hundreds and hundreds of years of killing them, persecuting them, expelling them, that Europe suddenly loves the Jews and they are their best friends is not only deceptive, but it is not true. You know, not a lot of people know this, but Queen Elizabeth, who was the Queen of England for 70 years, 7 decades, she visited over 110 different countries. She never once set foot in occupied Palestine. She visited apartheid South Africa, but she never visited apartheid Palestine. The Zionists were incapable of creating the state. They didn't have the means or the political clout in order to do that. The colony that now exists in Palestine was created by the British, and it wasn't created for sympathy or empathy or love for the Jewish race. No, it was created for British colonial interest, and that was the single motive for creating and occupying that land. During the Second World War, Britain was in a desperate situation and desperate for American help and assistance in the war. And they thought that by befriending the Jews, they may be able to influence American opinion in order to join them in their war efforts. Another factor was, after the fall of the Ottoman Khilafah, Britain had designs on that land, and creating a colony in the heart of the Muslim world would help them to achieve those interests. So the colony in Palestine was never created out of sympathy, empathy, or love for the Jews. It was created solely for British interest. It was used then for British interest, and it is used today for Western interests. And Balfour, who signed the declaration in 1917, he himself was anti-Semitic. He himself didn't trust the Jewish people. So it was not done for the sake of the Jews. It wasn't done out of love or compassion for the Jews. It was done purely for British interest. And that's the purpose it served then, and that's the purpose it serves now. So when America became the global leader, they also used the occupation of Palestine for the same ends.
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. I say, imagine our circumstance in the world were there no Israel. How many battleships would there be? How many troops would be stationed?
So it's very deceptive for US and UK and European politicians to somehow imply that the Zionists are controlling their parties and their politics. So the Zionists are being used by the West and are being used as a cover for what they are doing. For example, the Zionist colony is not viable. It doesn't even have an economy that can sustain that colony. They have to have $3 to $4 billion worth of aid every year for the last so many decades in order to sustain that state. They need daily delivery of military weapons every day from America and Europe in order to fight Gaza, which doesn't have an army, air force, navy, or a standing army. Yet they need daily supplies of weapons and even logistical support from the West, and support and cover from the Arab regimes in order to sustain itself. It is not a viable state. It has never been a viable state. Even if the Zionist lobby didn't exist, even if they didn't pay and give money to MPs, and they didn't have influence over other institutions in Britain, it would have minimal to no effect on British policy towards Palestine because it is not dictated to by the Zionists, but the policy is there to serve Western interests. The occupation of Palestine serves the West. So it's very convenient for the West to put the Zionists in between themselves and the Muslim Ummah and blame them for the problem of the occupation. Zionism is a symptom, not the cause. The real cause of the occupation of Palestine is Western hegemony of our lands and the Western hegemony of international institutions to control global geopolitics. The real problem has to be defined in terms of colonialism. The occupation of Palestine is a Western colonial project, and that is how the problem needs to be defined. It's not a problem between Muslims and Jews or Muslims and Zionists. It is a problem between the Western world and the Muslim world. So to recap, this is a colonial problem between the West and the Muslim world. The occupation of Palestine serves Western interests. Zionism is a symptom and not the cause. And the cause is Western hegemony and colonial designs on the rest of the world. Kicking a handful of MPs out of Parliament will have little to no effect on their colonial policy in the Middle East. Britain believes in the occupation of Palestine, and they will defend it. Joining the Parliament in order to reform its foreign policy is like a Muslim joining the church and becoming a Christian in order to change Christian doctrine. It's not going to happen. You don't do it from the inside. You have to do it from the outside. Our politics should not be defined by their politics, and it should not be limited by their institutions. We don't need to go through their institutions in order to achieve our political aims. Our constituency should not be defined and limited to national borders. Our ummah is bigger than that. We need to break free from secular, national, democratic politics, and we need to be global in our thinking, and we need to behave like one ummah, and our focus has to be the Muslim ummah in the Muslim world. That is our real constituency. The Muslims in the West can do so much in order to achieve her political objective. We need to motivate Muslims in the Muslim world to understand that the problem is a colonial European colonization of our land. And this is facilitated by the Arab rulers in the Muslim world. And that's the weak link, because they are weak. And our wrath, our energy, our focus needs to be on them. And we need to contact people in our armed forces, our ulama, our scholars, our tribal leaders, our businessmen, any kind of influential people in the Muslim world to create an opinion and focus that opinion on the Arab rulers that facilitate the occupation of Palestine, and change them and create an Islamic change and unify the Muslim land and liberate the land of Palestine. Because the UN and the UK are never ever going to liberate that land. So trying to achieve a change through their institution is never ever going to happen. Salah ad-Din liberated Palestine, and in that we have a template on how to liberate Palestine a second time. The Zionist state didn't come through the ballot box, and the removal of the Zionist state won't come through the ballot box. The ballot box is there to maintain the status quo. We as a Muslim ummah need to think globally, our politics need to be global, and we need to think different. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.